Noam Chomsky has been a vocal critic of the U.S. role in the migration crisis, arguing that its policies and actions have significantly contributed to the conditions that drive people to leave their homes. Before I run the clip of Noam, I will mention some of the causes and follow up with some of the other issues. Chomsky emphasizes past U.S. involvement in destabilizing Central American, Middle Eastern and African countries, citing examples like the overthrow of the Guatemalan government in 1954 and the support for repressive regimes in Nicaragua and El Salvador. These interventions, he argues, created environments of violence, poverty, and corruption, pushing people towards migration. He critiques the U.S.'s promotion of free trade agreements and structural adjustment programs, which he believes exacerbate inequality and poverty in developing nations. These economic policies, he says, create a situation where people lack basic necessities and opportunities, leading them to seek better lives elsewhere. Chomsky criticizes the U.S.'s war on drugs, arguing it fuels violence and instability in countries like Mexico and Colombia, pushing people to flee for safety. Additionally, he criticizes the militarization of borders, seeing it as a harsh and ineffective response to the migration crisis. Now off to the clip of Noam speaking about migration problems in general.
How should developed countries respond to the mass migrations caused by war and climate change?
Well, certainly not the way they're doing it. In fact, what's called the refugee crisis is in fact a moral crisis in the West. I mean, there are countries where there are cases in history of migrant crises that are severe. In fact, we're living in such a case. The migrant crisis from Europe eliminated or destroyed the indigenous population. That's a pretty serious crisis. That's the extreme case of migrant crisis. Today, there are countries that are absorbing huge numbers of refugees. Lebanon, poor country, has about 40% migrants, refugees. Lebanon had nothing to do with engendering the crisis, but it's taking the consequences. Jordan has a huge number of refugees, so does Turkey. The United States has practically none. Europe has very limited number, very small compared with its, not only with its wealth, but also with its role in creating the crises. Our role in recent years is even greater. So on the one hand, you have rich, powerful countries which have played a major role in creating the crises and are now groaning because maybe they'll have to accept a tiny bit of the consequences. And you have poor countries, which had nothing to do with the crisis, which are absorbing the refugees. So that's a moral crisis. We have in the United States the same crisis with regard to Central America. People fleeing from Central America are, for the most part, fleeing from crimes that we committed. And then we tell Mexico to send them back and not let them come near our border, pretty much as Europe does in the case of Turkey. This is not only true of the migrants from Iraq, Syria, the Levant region, but also from Africa. One effect of the destruction of Libya, actually initiated by France and England, with the U.S. Leading from behind, as Obama put it, has been not only to destroy Libya, but to and vastly increase the level of the human disaster, catastrophe, killings in Libya. But it also opened a funnel for people fleeing from Africa. Well, Europe has a certain relation to Africa over the past couple of centuries. Don't have to review it. Now Europe, again, groaning under the impact of the flight of people from regions it has devastated. And this is not ancient history. It's recent, current history. So take the richest country in Africa, potentially the richest country, which could have led Africa to become the flourishing region, Congo, enormous wealth. It was a Belgian colony. The treatment of the Congo by the Belgians was horrendous, even by the standards of European imperialism, which was horrible enough. It was one of the worst cases. In 1960, the Congo did achieve liberation. They had a political leader, young political leader, very promising, very popular, Patrice Lumumba. What happened? The CIA instantly targeted him for assassination, but they didn't make it. The Belgians managed to assassinate him first through proxies, and they didn't take any chances. So his body was cut up in pieces and dissolved in sulfuric acid. That took care of Lumumba, and the Congo hoped for independence. Then the United States and its allies supported a murderous kleptomaniac, Mobutu, as long as they could. Won't go through what's left of the country. Right now, the last couple of years, the worst atrocities in the world are carried out in the Congo. In eastern Congo, millions of people have been slaughtered in the last couple of years. One reason for it is your cell phones. Multinationals are hovering over the warring militias to get the minerals that are needed for high-tech equipment like cell phones in the West. That's the Congo. It's not ancient history. That extends over much of the region. So yes, there's a migrant crisis in Europe, a moral crisis, and one of extreme danger to the world. I mean, I'm old enough to remember what it means when Austria and Germany have political parties that are effectively neo-Nazi. I can remember Hitler's speeches in 1936, 37, and it's not a nice memory. And that's what's happening in reaction to what's called the refugee crisis. We have our own variant of it, which is severe and vicious. And again, of course, coming up in the presidential campaign.
Chomsky criticizes the dehumanization of migrants in U.S. political discourse, which he sees as fostering prejudice and discriminatory policies. He argues that migrants should be treated with compassion and respect, and their asylum claims should be processed fairly and humanely. Chomsky advocates for tackling the root causes of migration, such as poverty, violence, and inequality, through international cooperation and diplomacy. He believes that addressing these issues will reduce the need for people to leave their homes and seek better lives elsewhere. I hope you liked the video and give the channel a subscribe. Take care, bye-bye.